Welcome back to the big story tonight. We take stock on the war on graft. President Uhuru Kenyatta is on record admitting that he wants to leave a legacy in the war against corruption. Let's listen in to what the president had to say.
We want to be able to join hands together and say corruption is a vice. It doesn't make a difference whether you are in government, whether you're out of government. We must come together and eliminate corruption so that our people can get the services that they are due as taxpayers of this republic.
Well, it is tough talk there from President Uhuru Kenyatta. Let's bring in our lawyer Ndegwa Njiru with us in studio tonight. A lot of double-speak judging from the president's words and his actions in some of the nominations that he's been making. But Ndegwa, it's been 3 months now since the government suspended procurement officers as well as accounting officers and ordered their vetting to determine the stability of their jobs. And underpinning this was the fact that major corruption scandals happen or initiated mainly with procurement and accounting officers right at the center of it. But 3 months later, this has not happened. It is an exercise, with a lot of privacy or secrecy, so to speak. What does that say to the president's war on corruption, considering some of the instructions he's been given are not being implemented?
What that tells me, Michelle, is very simple. That the presidency is in a panic mood. And why do I say so? I say so because each and every time, and I want to go back to 2017 elections and the Jubilee Manifesto. The Jubilee Manifesto did not comprise of anything called the Big Four agenda, and it was not a manifesto that was premised on an individual's legacy. But come the swearing in, 3-4 months down the line, an agenda of a legacy comes in. Today, another legacy agenda of fighting corruption also comes in. So to me, I'm comparing the presidency with a student who is sitting for a KCPE, and he's given the multiple choices questions, and the invigilator says that, you know, guys, you're only remaining with the 5 minutes, and the guy is in question number 20. So what the student does, he just ticks and starts ticking so that he can complete the paper and just hand over. That's the kind of the presidency that we are having.
The president also made it clear that it doesn't matter who you know or how much money you have, there will be no sacred cows in the war against corruption. But let's talk about officers appointed or nominated by the president who've had corruption scandals during their tenure, and instead of seeing them step aside, we've either seen them being transferred to different dockets or still serving under the same docket. Case in point, some of those we've mentioned tonight, Hassan Wario, Richard Ekai, since from the sports ministry, now serving ambassadorial positions. And of course, the law requires that any state officer facing criminal charges should step aside, paving way for investigation. But for ambassadors, on the other hand, when they're abroad, they're immune to arrest and prosecution. Could it be perhaps that some of these appointments and nominations have been made deliberately to ensure that some of these individuals do not face the corruption scandals against them?
Exactly. The president is not sincere, and the government is not sincere with Kenyans. They are taking us for a ride, and they do not mean what they say. In essence, they are preaching water and drinking wine. And that's a tragedy that this country is having. There is no political goodwill to fight the vice of corruption in this country, simply because the most corrupt are the people serving in that particular government. You just quoted Senator Murkomen. When we started, when the government allegedly, and I want to use the word allegedly, started the war against corruption, some individuals, and that is Murkomen, was quoted saying that it was targeting some particular individuals. So we are personalizing the war against corruption, and not just stopping at personalizing it, we are also politicizing it. And we're trying to say that this war is being targeted to make sure that some particular individuals do not either become presidents or do not, in the future, do not even become governors or whatever aspirations that they have. But are we fighting corruption to regain the integrity of our nation, or are we fighting corruption to preserve some particular individuals? What the government is doing, they are fighting corruptions just at the layer tops, but in the middle and at the center of it, they are the person exercising and practicing that vice. So the president must walk the talk. If he really means his words, and thank you for recapping and giving a recapping for him what he has been saying. And it is important for him to start now keeping tracks of his statements, because we Kenyans are keeping track of his statements. If he means his words, let him take actions. Let him sack. Let him ask all those guys who have been cited for corruption allegations. Let him ask them to step aside if he means what he says.
All right, and of course, we want to speak to Abel Oyeyo. He's an advisor to Nairobi Governor Mike Mbuvi-Sonko, but he has not been able to make it to studio tonight. But what is the process? What informs the president's nominations, especially those that come after corruption scandals have already been leveled against these individuals?
What informs the president's appointments is, one, where do you come from? Two, which political party do you prescribe to? Three, what role did you play in the elections? So ideally, the appointments are done to reward the cronies. Either you financed him, either you come from his tribe, either you come from his party or a party that has a coalition with, or simply you are appointed because you could help probably do some campaign, even probably for the future. Remember, the appointments that were done by the president, be it in the parastatals, be it in the council of the ministers, or wherever the president did his appointments, there was one overriding issue, that we are appointing you and you'll help somebody, one of my own, to become president in 2022. So there was no objectivity in the appointments. There was no interrogation of the merits and the meritocracy of individuals. They were just appointed for a particular purpose. And that is when we start going wrong. In this country, there are good people. There are people who are clean. They have a good record, who can help the president achieve his legacy.
All right, but since the war on corruption began,
yes,
the conversation has largely revolved around the fact that Chapter 6 and the question of integrity perhaps needs more interpretation, and perhaps it needs to be a bit clearer. Let's talk about integrity itself, because we have several leaders appointed by President Uhuru Kenyatta, nominated by the president or not, have serious corruption scandals leveled against them. Many of them, however, say this happened in my tenure, but it wasn't me, it was a procurement officer. Where does that leave us in matters conscience and integrity?
You know, Michelle, that is calling for what I called self-introspection. And we also interrogate our operating system, the software that is in us. We have a very, very good hardware, which I'm calling the Constitution, but which was, however, watered down by the 10th Parliament when they went to enact the Leadership and Integrity Act. We need to retrace our steps. We ask ourselves, when Kenyans enacted Chapter 6 of the Constitution, what were their wishes, what was their aspirations, and what norm were they intending to cultivate, and what culture were they intending to inculcate in our people? Secondly, once we get it right on the hardware and review the Leadership and Integrity Act, and even probably repeal it and reenact it afresh, then we start going to speaking to our morality and our consciousness, so that we reconcile our consciousness with the hardware of the good laws that we shall have enacted. But the question is, can good laws be enacted by a bad parliament, or a parliament that is constituted or a conglomeration of individuals with questionable characters? The answer to that is no. A good law is as good as the people who enact it. So even our parliament must mature up. But don't you forget that it's not parliament that elects itself. It's we, the Kenyans people, who elect this parliament. So it is also calling upon ourselves, and that's when I'm then saying that Kenyans must speak to their morals and their consciousness, that you should not elect a person who has been or who has questionable character, whether he comes from your tribe, whether he comes from your political party, whether he bought you a banana or an orange. We must be able to elect persons who qualify
Right.
to what you people, to what is reconcilable with their consciousness.
I mean, integrity basically begins with the voter themselves. But let's discuss more about the sending home of procurement and accounting officers, because it was a move that was meant to curb corruption. But remember that this was something that the NAC administration did back in 2003, and clearly that did not end the vice. We're here 15 years later. Mega scandals clearly perpetrated by the high and mighty, with procurement and accounting officers only being the facilitators. So that being said, how can we achieve a holistic and systemic approach to the war on graft?
I think the president needs to include all Kenyans in the fight against corruptions. But for us to be fully included, the president must demonstrate that he really means his words. So that then, if he convinces that Kenyans that I am ready to fight corruption, of course by first of all sacking or asking those persons who have been cited to step aside, then we Kenyans can join hands. If you remember during the time of Kibaki 1, especially when NAC Mwenge was sworn in, Kenyans were very civil. They would stop and actually even arrest, do private arrest to the police officers who are being bribed on the road. But today, Kenyans are not even feeling part of it. Why? Because these procurement officers, these accounting officers, if you see a project being launched somewhere, just know that that project is being launched because there's a kickback somewhere. So even the projects, be it roads, be it dams, be it electricity, name them, they're not being actually launched so that they can address the plight of Wanjiku. They are being launched because either the procurement officer, the accounting officer, or the person launching them has an interest in them. And so until we divorce this character of going to government to get rich quick, other than to serve, and unless we speak to our emotions, our consciousness, and our morality, that we do not go to government to get rich, we go to government to serve the people, then we still be in the bush. And we cannot start going that direction of going to government to serve when people are accruing astronomical or big salaries. So we must first of all review all the salaries downwards, be it that of member of parliament, the president, the governors, so that we make these posts and these seats very unattractive to any person who has the appetite of getting rich quick.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I remember during the vetting of some of these positions, a lifestyle audit was conducted, and many of them came out and said, we're multimillionaires, but we accrued wealth with our salaries, in the various public offices that we've held, something that, of course, makes these officers very attractive. And as that even 6 of President Uhuru Kenyatta's 9 nominees who were cleared for appointment as ambassadors and high commissioners, just 6 of them have a combined net worth of 1.4 billion shillings.
Yes.
But that aside, just as we finish up, Ndegwa,
yes.
3 years, before 2022, before the end of President Uhuru Kenyatta's tenure, he's been talking tough on matters of graft. How would you score him out of 10 in the fight against corruption?
The president has called, if I can be very generous with him, out of 10, very generous. I think even maybe 2.5 out of 10, simply because he does not mean what he's saying. And that is why we Kenyans are saying that we need to have 2 very critical things happening. There was a proposal to have the corruption summit or the corruption conference. I don't know what happened to it. Secondly, we need to have a constitutional conference so that we interrogate the hardware that is premising the way we people are being governed. Even before we yield to the proposed or to the agitated referendum, we have a constitutional conference that will help us interrogate the things that we need to review so that we can come up with the kind of the Kenyans that we want. Finally, the institutions that have been mandated to deal with the issues of corruption, that is being led by one Archbishop Wabukala, he must remember one thing, that is, his work is not just to police those people who are stealing public funds. He has also the work of speaking to the ethics of this country and the ethics that people prescribes to. And that is why, when there was this handshake between the president and Honorable Raila Odinga, they spoke to one thing which is very important, the question of national ethos. I don't know how far the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has gone to interrogate and to incorporate the question of its ethos and ethics in fight against corruption. So as we fight corruption, as the EACC police on corruptions, let them also deter and inhibit corruption by speaking to the ethos and ethics of Kenyans. All
right, many thanks, Ndegwa Njiru. There is a lawyer on the big story tonight as he takes talk on President Uhuru Kenyatta's war on corruption. He is on record admitting that he wants to leave a legacy in the war against graft, but is he doing it right? Many thanks for watching tonight. My name is Michelle Ngele Odhiambo. Good night.
This is KTN News.